So, Duncan Orr-Ewing, our speaker tonight. Thank you very much for coming along, Duncan. I know a lot of people will have heard of Duncan. Duncan's worked for RSPB for 33 years. Originally, I believe, he got involved with the red kite reintroduction in the Highlands before being involved in conservation as a conservation officer in central Scotland. And then since 1999 has been part of the Scottish leadership team with quite a wide range of responsibilities on RSPB's lands holdings and species and policy and recovery work, working with private landowners, but also an investigations team that look at detecting and helping to prosecute wildlife crimes with the police. So obviously very valuable, important work. So as well as that, Duncan does a lot of volunteering, both in this country and abroad, has particular passion for red kites and does a lot across Europe as well as here. And he's also the chair, and this is what he's come to us tonight as, is the chair of the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group, which in itself is an amazing and very active group across the central Scotland that we're going to hear a lot about tonight. So I won't go into a lot of detail. I'll leave that to Duncan. But it's got a huge range of amazing projects to help raptors across our area, from ravens to owls to peregrine falcons to kestrels. It is all that's, I mean, from putting up nest boxes to long-term monitoring to tracking to ringing. There's so much that goes on to the group. So over to you, Duncan, and thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm just about to share my screen, so bear with me. Okay, is that full screen?
Yep, it's not on presentation mode yet.
That's it. Right.
That's
Brilliant. Okay, everybody. Nice to meet everybody virtually. Not very used to doing virtual talks, so you'll have to bear with me. I do a lot of talks around the country and have done over the years, but virtual is not the way I normally do it. So very briefly, yes, Duncan Orr-Ewing, I'm chair of the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group, part of the network of raptor study groups that cover the whole of Scotland. And I'm here to talk a bit about the work of our group locally. I'm going to start off, though, talking a bit about the Raptor Group network nationally, and then home in on some of the national projects that we do between us as groups, and then focus down on some more local stuff in the area that we cover. So I'll start off by just giving a bit of background on the Scottish Raptor Study Group. So the first Raptor Study Group in Scotland was in North East Scotland, but since then a series of groups have sprung up all over the country. We now have 12 branches, cover everywhere from Shetland to Dumfries and Galloway. There are about 350 to 400 experts. We are all volunteers. We do all of this in our spare time, largely because we have a passion for working on birds and going out into nice parts of the countryside and getting a bit of hands-on activity. The other things that the groups do is we have an annual conference. In fact, our annual conference is coming up very shortly. We've started holding it at Stirling University. So that's happening in a few weeks' time. And then each branch, our branch at least anyway, we have biannual branch meetings when all of our group come together. We decide what we're going to do, our plans and projects, and also sort of divide up work amongst us to make sure there's no duplication. And that's quite an important part of what we do because some of our work at least is done under Schedule 1 monitoring licenses issued by Nature Scot. So in those circumstances, it's quite important that we don't duplicate effort and we make sure that birds are, when they are being monitored, they're not getting undue disturbance and we're collecting only the data that we need and no more. Across the Raptor Study Group network, we monitor at least 5,000 raptor territories. I should say, when I say raptor territories, it's raptors, owls, and ravens. Ravens are treated as an honorary raptor. I'll come on to them later. And what we're looking for really is to get some indication of status, distribution, and breeding success. And all the data that we collect is contributed to the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme. To become a member of a raptor study group, you basically have to do some raptor monitoring, and you have to contribute your data into the group, the work of the group, and to the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme. So this is the Scottish Raptor Study Group branch network. As I said earlier, we are 12 groups. You can see our group here right in the middle in central. I'm also a member of the Tayside group, and in the past, when I was involved with red kites on the Black Isle in the early 90s, I was also a member of the Highland group. So I've been a member of a few groups, and yeah, very active in both central and Tayside with my own personal monitoring and study areas. And quite a number of our members have dedicated study areas and work on particular species. Some work on all species within a geographical area. But the general tendency is to work a particular area and to, monitor all the raptors that you find in that particular location. So the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme was established in 2002. It's got 8 partner organisations. So there are 3 government organisations, which include Nature Scot and Forestry and Land Scotland and Forestry Scotland, or Scottish Forestry. And there are 5 NGOs involved. The raptor study groups contribute most of the data to the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme, but other organisations like RSPB Scotland and Forestry and Land Scotland also contribute data. We focus primarily on the annual monitoring, abundance, distribution and breeding success of raptors, owls and ravens in Scotland. And the programme is mostly funded by Nature Scot, but it is mostly delivered by BTO Scotland, actually based in the University of Stirling, who run the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme. They get funded to do that, and they get funded to manage and analyse the data. So we have some major objectives of the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme, and that's cooperation. So we all cooperate together to bring information and data together, which in turn serves the conservation of raptors. We try and do good survey and monitoring to high standard. We actually produced a few years ago what we call the Raptor Monitoring Manual, which gives best practice monitoring techniques for raptors. It rapidly sold out, and indeed many other countries in Europe have started trying to access this book. It was then republished and sold out again very quickly. So the work that the Scottish Raptor Study Group does is widely recognised not only in Scotland but also across Europe as well. So we're well known for doing good work on raptors. And then there's the data and information standards. This is mainly the BTO side of things, where they make sure that we have high and uniform standards for data collection, that it's done consistently, it's analysed, and every year there is an annual report that's produced which compiles all the data that we collect across Scotland. And that data, as I said earlier, just is used predominantly by conservation bodies to inform the better conservation of raptors on the ground. So moving back to Central Scotland Raptor Study Group, we were one of the first raptor study groups that were founded. We were founded in 1983, based on the old Central Scotland region. Since then, we've expanded out, and we cover not only Stirling, Clacks, Falkirk, and the old Central region, but we also cover North Lanarkshire, East and West Dunbartonshire, and Glasgow, north of the Clyde. So we cover all of the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. We currently have around 70 members. Some of you may be on the call. We have group meetings twice a year, which alternate between the Argety Red Kite Centre and latterly, as we've gained more members in the Glasgow area, we've actually started holding some of our meetings at the Strathclyde Park Water Sports Centre as well, near Hamilton. And we have pretty good monitoring coverage of most raptor and owl species and raven across our area. There are some gaps. We're always looking to fill those gaps and for new people to come into the group. We're a very welcoming group, and we have people of all ages and, good distribution, male and female folk monitoring raptors in our area. So I'm sure those who are local, I don't have to give much of an introduction to what our area looks like, but it's highly variable in terms of topography and landscape. So we probably have we do have almost the full suite of raptors, owls and ravens that are present in Scotland. So our area that we cover ranges from the high tops of the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, here looking across from just south of Callander up towards Glenfinglas and Balquhidder. So we have the Highland and upland raptor species. We also have the lowland raptor species. This is my home area around Doon, not far from Dunblane. And so these are the braes of Doon. We also have the Carse of Stirling, the flatlands between Stirling itself, stretching Flanders Moss right across to Aberfoyle and Gartmore and that kind of area. And then, of course, there's the River Forth estuary, which, is of interest to us because it brings a different range of species, or one particular species that raptor species that until recently we hadn't had at all, and that's marsh harrier, which has just started colonizing our area. And in all the time, so I've been a member of the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group since 1994, and over that time we've seen big changes in raptor populations in our area. Most raptor species have increased their population. When I started, I have to say even buzzards were a relatively scarce species. Their population has expanded quite rapidly. But we've also had new colonizers into our area as well. And I'll talk about a few of those tonight. I haven't got any photos of them, but one of them is the marsh harrier, which about 5 years ago colonized our area. And we've got a small but gradually expanding population of that species. I can't sadly talk about raptors without talking about raptor persecution. This image is taken from RSPB and just shows the distribution of confirmed incidents of bird of prey persecution in Scotland between 2003 and 2017. You'll see from the map that there's a strong sort of distribution towards the east of the country of raptor persecution incidents. Also, as we probably know, quite closely linked particularly to areas of driven grouse shooting. Fortunately, I have to say in the central Scotland area, we have not got many driven grouse moors. We used to have some, but gradually most of them have gone out of driven grouse shooting. Over the years, we have, certainly in the early years when I was monitoring raptors in this area, we had quite a lot of raptor persecution incidents. I have to say in recent years, situation has greatly improved in our area at least, but there are still problems elsewhere, of course. And, I'm a member, as I said earlier, of the Tayside Raptor Study Group. In parts of the Tayside Raptor Study Group area where the landscape looks a bit more like this in places, this is an image of part of the Angus Glens. There are many more problems with raptor persecution, and closely linked, as I said, mainly to areas that are managed for driven grouse shooting, where the imperative for those who own or manage these areas is to maximize the production of grouse for clients to shoot, and sadly, protected and non-protected species are removed, especially if they predate on grouse. So raptors are often the first thing to be targeted, but as we know, other predators can also be removed as well. And in that sense, I mean, the Raptor Study Groups are a voluntary organisation. We're mostly about monitoring and protecting birds of prey and working with landowners to conserve birds of prey. But unfortunately, because raptors do get persecuted, occasionally we have to get involved in the political side of things as well. So hen harrier, sadly, is our most persecuted species in Scotland, mainly because its diet includes red grouse. And the Raptor study groups have participated in the Hen Harrier Action Day, which is run each year across the UK. So we've had events. This was an event on the left in the Tayside Raptor Study Group area. And then in 2018, I was involved, along with others from the Raptor Study Groups, in presenting a petition to the Scottish Parliament where we called for a state-regulated system of game bird hunting. So effectively licensing of game bird hunting, which is common practice in most other European countries. But we have largely unregulated game bird hunting in the UK. But as of last year, that has changed. In 2024, the Scottish Government passed a bill, now an act, called the Wildlife Management and Muirburn Act, which for the first time in anywhere in the UK, we now have state-regulated hunting, and that is licensing of all grouse shooting, all muirburn, all trapping, banning of snaring, and enhanced powers were also given to the Scottish SPCA to investigate wildlife crime. And I would say that initiative really started off with the Scottish Raptor Study Groups presenting its petition to the Scottish Parliament. You can see we got over 7,600 signatures to that petition. That then escalated through the Parliament and eventually has become the law that we now see today. And hopefully that will result in a reduction in raptor persecution in those kind of areas. The team that developed the petition and submitted the petition to the Scottish Parliament actually won the Nature of Scotland Award a few years ago as well. Right, so I want to talk a bit about national surveys. So moving away from persecution and talk about something a bit more positive. So one thing the Raptor study groups have done ever since their inception is work with Nature Scot, RSPB Scotland and other partners to run a series of national surveys of key species. So the list of species includes hen harrier, golden eagle, merlin, peregrine, and they've been done on a 10-year cycle. For a bird like the hen harrier, which is so persecuted and vulnerable, the surveys have been running every 5 years, and the aim is to get an accurate population estimate of the hen harrier population in each period. So this slide just gives you a timeline of hen harriers, just to give you a picture. So 1800s, hen harriers were common and widespread. In the 1850s, driven grouse shooting becomes popular. Hen harriers routinely killed. By 1900, the hen harrier had become extinct as a breeding bird in mainland Britain, only remaining on Orkney. In 1939, with gamekeepers at war, hen harriers naturally recolonized Scotland. In 1958, hen harriers bred again in England. And since then, so from the 1980s up till now, every 5 years pretty well, we've been running population surveys of hen harriers to monitor how that population is progressing. Most of the population are in Scotland. It's less than 50 pairs in England. The Isle of Man has a healthy population, but the bulk of the hen harrier population in the UK is in Scotland, most in the west. In the east, sadly, we have far fewer, even though the habitat is very good for hen harriers. They are so persecuted that their population are at very low levels, and we know the population could be far higher than it is at present. So these are just an indication of some of the work we do with national surveys, and these studies appear in peer-reviewed papers. Hen harrier, the hen harrier survey is actually usually led by RSPB. The peregrine survey has been led by BTO in the past, but it's usually Raptor Study Group workers who do field workers who do most of the monitoring and go out and monitor the sites and contribute the data to the surveys. So yeah, that for hen harrier, it shows in the UK we have habitat to support an estimated 2,500 pairs, whereas our population at the moment is only about 600 breeding pairs, so scope for many more. Another species that we've carried out national surveys on, and which is well monitored by the Scottish Raptor Study Groups, in the central Scotland area, we monitor all the golden eagle home ranges every year. We've not got that many pairs, but fortunately, it looks like our golden eagle population across Scotland is gradually expanding with reduced persecution. It seems in recent years, at least, persecution of golden eagles has reduced, which is very welcome. And each year, this is what we hope to find. We go out and monitor all the regular sites. This is done under license, obviously. Same for many of these species from Nature Scot. So here you'll see in the screen here, we've got a large golden eagle eyrie, a brood of 2 chicks in there. Most of our eagles have a single chick. In fact, our productivity in our area is probably about, on average, over the long term, about half a chick per breeding pair. So actually, our golden eagle productivity is pretty low. The most productive eagles tend to be in the east of Scotland, where the prey base is much better, including mountain hares and grouse. So these are the kind of products that come out of these surveys. So this was the 2015 National Golden Eagle Survey, and you can see 10-year intervals these surveys have taken place. You can see where the plus 40, plus 21, these are where there have been increases in golden eagles. The minuses, mostly on the grouse moor areas, as you can see there, are where there have been declines. And we know most of where the historical golden eagle home ranges have been. So we also know what the potential for these populations would be. So for example, in the East Highlands, the East Grampians, we know that you can see here the population is bubbling along between around 30 breeding pairs, but the potential for that area is somewhere like 90 breeding pairs. And the difference is largely explained by illegal persecution suppressing the levels of golden eagles in those areas. In our area, you can see gradually in Tayside, it's more positive, and most of our golden eagle home ranges are occupied, albeit they're not very productive. And over time, a huge amount of work has gone into golden eagles. It's one of the most monitored species by the Raptor Study Groups. And the data from the Scottish Raptor Study Groups contributes to scientific publications, including this document, which has been really important in golden eagle conservation in Scotland. It's called a Conservation Framework for Golden Eagles. It's appeared in what was the SNH, now Nature Scot commissioned report series, using their natural heritage zones and showing where golden eagles are in favourable conservation status. So the green areas are where the species is in favourable conservation status. The red areas are where it's not in favourable conservation status, in fact, in poor conservation status. And you can see there a strong link, in the eastern part of Scotland, where golden eagles should be faring the best because the best habitat, most productive pairs, they're doing the worst in terms of their populations. And that is largely explained by illegal persecution on grouse moors. But this is what we like to see, and most Raptor Study Group workers are quite hands-on people. They like to get their hands on raptors and ring them and study them. You know, some sites have been monitored for decades and decades. We have information relating to those sites for a very long period of time. And in fact, the oldest or longest golden eagle study anywhere in the world is in northeast Scotland. And we have national programs. So here, for both of the eagle species, we have a national colour ringing program. So over recent years, not only have we been ringing the birds, we've been colour ringing them with these riveted on metal ionized rings. So yeah, this is very useful in identifying birds as they occupy new territories and when they start to breed, when we get changeovers of adults at nest sites and that kind of thing. And more recently, in recent years, one big development has been the development of satellite tag technology, which was mentioned at the beginning. So my first experience of tagging birds was when I worked on red kites on the Black Isle. And at that time, we were fitting radio tags onto birds. These were VHF tags, which you could monitor with some tracking gear, a Yagi aerial and a receiver box. You had to be within range of the bird to track it. I actually did some flights around Scotland and track the birds from the air using that technique. But more recently, with the new technology that's come on stream, what we're doing is fitting what are called satellite tags onto birds. These are GPS tags. There's one there. I'll show you a close-up of one in a minute, if you can see the arrow there. Basically, these are the tags that we use mostly on eagles have been developed in the US. We're talking about military-grade technology here. These tags allow you to track the birds in real time. Some of them speak to a satellite and transmit to a satellite. Some of the more recent tags that we're now using, called GSM tags, actually work from the mobile phone masts. And you get a mobile phone bill with a data download. So that is a cheaper way rather than using of getting the information. But as we've worked on these birds, the satellite tags, so for a golden eagle, the satellite tag that we use weighs 70 grams. A golden eagle is usually over 4 kilograms in weight, females bigger than males. And the tags that we use have to be under 3% of the body weight of the bird. So on red kites, the tags that we use are much smaller, and on hen harriers, the tags that we now use are even smaller than that. And to do this work, you have to be accredited. You have to have special approval from the BTO. You have to have a project. So there aren't many people that are qualified and accredited to do this work. Golden eagles is where we've spent a lot of our time. Golden eagles, for me, I've tagged quite a lot of golden eagles over the years, red kites and other species as well. So yeah, so what we do in these circumstances is working with Raptor Study Group folk. Here on the left, actually, I'm holding the bird, but I'm in Tayside, working with Keith Brockey from the Tayside Raptor Study Group, going to one of his eagle sites, and then fitting the satellite tag on the bird. So the bird is the tag is fitted with Teflon ribbon, which is used in aeronautics. It's used in aeroplanes for electronics and things, but it's like the name suggests, it's very soft material, and it doesn't abrade on the body of the bird and won't chafe the skin of the bird. So provided it's fitted very carefully, and these tags have to be fitted carefully, the bird can carry these tags for life and transmit data for life. So, for example, I fitted a tag on a bird in Dumfries and Galloway, a golden eagle in chick in 2011. That bird is still transmitting information today. And the other angle, of course, to this is, sadly, satellite tagging also allows us to track birds when they die. So, you know, as soon as you get a bird that's transmitting routinely from a particular area, it allows you to go in and find that bird. And sadly, quite often, we find these birds dead. In this case, this was a bird that was illegally persecuted in Angus. And we know from the sat tag data, it was driven overnight and then ended up dumped in a lay-by on Deeside. So the other reason we use satellite tags on birds, and this is my colleague I work with a lot in our group, a friend of mine, Dave Anderson. We've been working with the South of Scotland Golden Eagle project. So in my work at RSPB, I helped develop the South of Scotland Golden Eagle project. It came on the back of a notorious illegal persecution incident in the Scottish borders in 2008, where the female bird of the only breeding pair of golden eagles in the Scottish borders was poisoned. And after that, there was after a lot of acrimony, there was a coming together of people involved and organisations involved to try and find some solutions. And at that time, the then Environment Minister, Mike Russell, said he wanted to put golden eagles back if they were being killed. He would help support what's now become the South of Scotland Golden Eagle Project. So every year, since the sort of early 2010s, we've been collecting golden eagles as chicks from across the Highlands where there are twins. So we only take one bird from eagle twins, and then have been transporting birds to the south of Scotland to reinforce the small population of golden eagles there. And to date, over 40 birds have been translocated from the Highlands down to the south of Scotland. They're then reared in release aviaries down there. And subsequently, when they fledged, they're released. But before they're released, as you can see here, the birds are fitted with satellite tags, so the project team can follow and track the progress of these birds. So in the south of Scotland, following the translocations there, the survivals of the birds has been really good, and we're expecting in the coming years to have more breeding pairs. In fact, we've got pairs that have now built nests, and some have laid eggs as well. But like most large raptors, birds like golden eagles, they only really become sexually mature around 5 to 6 years of age. So this is really the start of it. And in the next few years, we would expect more breeding pairs of golden eagles to establish. We've got about 10 10 pairs that are established on territory at the moment. So the other species that we've been involved with over the years, this is central Scotland more broadly. So this is in Fife, was with the white-tailed eagle reintroduction. I've had a long involvement with white-tailed eagles dating back to my time in the Highlands. I was involved in a smaller capacity in the Wester Ross reintroduction around Loch Ewe in the early 1990s. And subsequently, in the early 2000s, we started a project in Fife, translocating birds in from Norway. This was the arrival of one of the set of birds from Norway at Edinburgh Airport, and we were hosted then by the Environment Minister, Rosanna Cunningham, Susan Davis from Nature Scot, if you know her, and Claire Smith, who was the project officer there in the foreground holding the eagle. And for the Fife white-tailed eagle reintroduction, we brought in about 70 birds over a period of 6 or 7 years. And gradually those birds have started becoming established. And I said earlier that there are missing breeding raptors from our area. Well, one of the species that is now starting to colonize the central Scotland area. In fact, we're waiting for our first breeding pair, but we've got birds very close. And I monitor pairs in Tayside, are these white-tailed eagles. And soon, I reckon, in central Scotland, we will have quite a number of breeding pairs of golden eagles. If I tell you there are over 50 breeding pairs now in Argyll, the estimated Scottish breeding population of white-tailed eagles is approaching 200 breeding pairs. So it's a matter of time till we get our first breeding pair in the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group area. But it's now quite routine to see these birds in our area. Indeed, satellite birds that I've fitted with satellite tags, I haven't seen them, but I know from the satellite tag data they've flown over my house. So yeah, and we have birds routinely now turning up, particularly in the Highland part of central Scotland and coming in from Argyll. Yeah, so these were the young eaglets. These birds were fitted with VHF tags. This was pre-satellite tag technology. So yeah. So I'll move on now to my personal main passion, which is red kites, which, as I said earlier, I've been involved with red kites since the early 1990s, overseeing the red kite reintroduction to the Black Isle. In recent years, and since I moved to central Scotland, we started reintroduction in this area. The next phase of reintroduction was in the central Scotland area, and that started in 1996 and ran to 2001. And I've been pretty well involved with monitoring the development of the red kite population ever since. Each year I monitor about 40 breeding pairs of red kites. The map on the right here shows the current, well, this was the distribution a few years ago, actually 2011. All the large dots represent breeding red kites at the time. And if you think going back to when we started reintroduction in 1989, there were only under 50 breeding pairs of red kites, all concentrated in this area in mid Wales. The current estimate for the red kite population in the UK is over 6,000 breeding pairs, probably about 400 in Scotland. And our reintroduced birds are now expanding rapidly. I found the first breeding pair in Perthshire, in Stirling. We've now got them breeding in Angus. They're gradually expanding into Loch Lomond, and the populations are joining up. So the Aberdeen reintroduction that took place in the sort of 2000s, that population and our central Scotland population have largely joined now, and we've got birds expanding northwards as well in the Lothians. So every year we have more breeding pairs of red kites. This is still a pretty thinly distributed species in Scotland, and much harder to find their nests than some other species because they wander over very huge areas. So my kind of study area ranges from this photo of Glenartney near Comrie. So my study area kind of extends from Comrie to Crieff, across to Braco, across to Blackford, and back to sort of Stirling, Doon, right across to Aberfoyle and the Trossachs. So yeah, I've been monitoring many pairs in that area for a large number of years. I kind of know most of the pairs personally these days. Originally, a lot of them were wing tagged, but we've now probably mostly into the second generation now of breeding birds. So sort of starting in March, I will be out looking for territorial birds, and then during the season, I go and find their nests under license from Nature Scot, and then hopefully at the end we try and ring some birds. So this is a red kite nest here in a larch plantation. They can be surprisingly hard to find, the nests, occasionally, but yeah, it's good fun, keeps me active, keeps me out of trouble. And then this is what we like to see. We go and climb the nests, usually in mid-June, and ring some young. So we used to wing tag all the young, but we haven't wing tagged chicks for many years. And for a period, we were also taking chicks under license from nests in our area to supply to the Aberdeenshire reintroduction as well, and again under Nature Scot license. And that's what we like to see, healthy brood of red kites. So most of our red kite pairs produce on average about 2 young per breeding pair. This is pretty typical. Sometimes we get 3s, very rarely we get 4. So we have had some broods of 4 in the past. And you can see here the wing tags that we used to fit. That was when we were really tracking the developing population, but now the population has become established. We've stopped wing tagging. And the fun doesn't stop in the breeding season with red kites. One of the joys of working on red kites is that there's a winter monitoring period as well. We've just come off the back of the coordinated red kite winter roost count. So every red kites are communal roosting species. They come together in the winter, or at least the non-breeding birds do, and come to roost sites. and we try and get a count of these birds every winter across the whole of UK and Ireland, and we contribute to an international European-wide monitoring scheme for this species. So the red kite is the only native raptor that we have whose whole population is confined to the continent of Europe. So Europe has a particular responsibility for this species. And in recent years, our counts in Scotland, we've counted over 1,000 birds at our roosts, and every year the numbers seem to be going up, which is good. And there are few better spectacles, I would say, than seeing kites coming to roost. One roost we have is over 150 birds. In other countries, I've seen roosts of 600-700 birds, so we can hopefully look forward to that in the future. So if you're working on kites, quite often you trip across buzzards as well. As I said earlier, when I started working in this area, nobody was working on buzzards. They were actually quite a scarce species. I mean, they're now pretty well established in every area of suitable location. At one time, they must have been very heavily persecuted in our area, but that seems to have stopped to a large extent. We have been trapping and ringing buzzards for many years using cage traps, but we also ring the chicks in the nest as well. And over the years, we have ringed hundreds and hundreds of buzzards. Our area in central Scotland has probably seen more buzzards ringed than any other part of the UK. We were originally told we did a wing tagging program as well for many years. There are still some birds going about with wing tags. We tagged a huge number of birds, usually about 90 a year for many years. And we were originally told that most of our young buzzards stayed close to the natal area. Well, that's not what we found. When we started wing tagging these birds, we found they were actually moving some quite big distances. We had birds that we tagged in the sort of Doon Calendar area, which was our main study area, that turned up in Caithness. In quite a few ended up in Dumfries and Galloway. This is a young buzzard, by the way. You can tell by the pale iris. So older buzzards have a darker iris. So one other species that I've worked on a lot over the years, I started on this really when I worked in the Highlands. I worked with Roy Dennis and the internationally known osprey expert, and spent a lot of time with Roy in July, usually out ringing ospreys and monitoring nests before that. And when I moved to central Scotland, we only had one breeding pair or two breeding pairs of osprey locally. And in fact, it's a little known fact that one of our original pair was the 12th pair in Scotland. So if you know your history of ospreys, the first osprey that returned back to breed after an absence of around 50 years was at Lochgarten in Strathspey, and gradually, obviously, new pairs established in the Strathspey area. Well, when I was working in the Highlands, the first breeding pair out of the Highlands, well, there were a couple, there was one in Tayside and one in central Scotland, became established. And our pair in central Scotland was pair 12. And from those sort of humble origins, we've now got a really healthy osprey population in our patch. And a lot of that progress has been achieved on the back of building artificial osprey platforms, which we've done a lot of, but also where we've had nests robbed over the years, we've managed to move the nests as well to prevent egg collectors from stealing the eggs and moving ospreys into areas where they won't be found. So our osprey population in central Scotland is really thriving. I mean, it's like something of the order of 60 breeding pairs now. So it's a substantial proportion of the Scottish population. It's also one of the most productive osprey populations in Scotland. And in recent years, chicks from central Scotland, again taken under license, have been sent to Spain for a reintroduction project there. So there are international collaborations going on as well. And yeah, we participate, as do all the raptor study groups, in the we have a standard ringing program for ospreys. So there's a color ringing program, and increasingly we get records. I mean, the great thing with ospreys is you get fantastic resightings of color ring birds, not only from UK, but also from the main wintering ground, which is in West Africa, in Gambia and Senegal, where a lot of bird watchers go. A lot of people are photographing birds, and we end up getting records of birds on their wintering ground as well. The other thing that has happened in more recent years is more ospreys are short stopping. They're not migrating to West Africa, and in fact wintering particularly in the Iberian Peninsula. And we're getting more and more records from Spain of our birds wintering there. And a few years ago, a bird that I ringed locally turned up on the Cape Verde Islands, unfortunately found dead, but was the first osprey ringed in Scotland that had got to the Cape Verde Islands, which, if you look on a map, is not too far from Brazil. Yeah, and we try and get folk out. This was my daughter, probably about 4 or 5 years of old, coming out with me, ringing an osprey brood. Looks a bit underwhelmed, still underwhelmed about doing any raptor work, but has had some pretty good raptor experiences over the years. So yeah, ospreys are a bird. We're working at the moment to try and expand ospreys into areas where we still haven't got breeding birds. So focusing on places like Clackmannanshire, around Glasgow, and also in North Lanarkshire as well. So another project of ours in the central group that has been extremely successful is our kestrel project. We probably have the biggest kestrel box and project now anywhere in Scotland, possibly the UK. And this is mostly focused in the North Lanarkshire area, sort of in the area between Glasgow, stretching across to Coatbridge, Motherwell, up to Kilsyth and that kind of area. And we have a lot of kestrel nest boxes out and a really healthy kestrel population. Sadly, this is one species that has not been thriving anywhere within its range. Its population has been declining, but we have a healthy population in that area, and it's one of our priority species for working on now. We're putting out more kestrel nest boxes in new areas and trying to get more kestrels established. The reasons for kestrel declines are being explored, but the main reason seems to be around agricultural intensification and decline in small mammal populations, with voles and mice being the main prey of kestrels. And one kestrel that was ringed not too far from here, to give you an example of some of the interesting recoveries, was recovered somewhere near Moscow in Russia. So another species that we've worked on, I'm sort of moving through the species now, but probably one of our longest running studies has been of this species, the peregrine falcon. Patrick Stirling, who's a member of the group, used to be the chair of the Central Scotland group before me, has been studying peregrines right back into the 1960s and the pesticide era. So this was when the peregrine population crashed because of the impacts of DDT, thinning of eggshells, and a lot of peregrine monitoring was going on, led by Derek Ratcliffe, ex of the NCC. And Patrick and other peregrine watchers came on board with that and started monitoring peregrines at that time. Again, this is a species that we used to have a really healthy population of, particularly in the highland areas, but has gradually been declining in the highland areas, whereas the population in the lowland areas has been doing much better. And that's a healthy brood of young peregrines. This is what peregrine watchers like to see. And yeah, we would aim to ring as many peregrine broods as we can in the season. And an exciting project that has just started in recent years is what's called the Glasgow Peregrine Project. And here we've been installing nest boxes on high buildings in Glasgow. There's one pair that's nesting on the University Tower, Glasgow University, which has got a camera on it. And the Glasgow Peregrine Project has been developing that with the university. The project has featured on TV, is getting a lot of attention, and we're now expanding, or my colleagues in the group are expanding that project out. We hope to get more breeding pairs of peregrines in the centre of Glasgow, and we've got other pairs of peregrines nesting on high flats around the Glasgow area and on bridges and that kind of thing as well. Those pairs and the pairs that are nesting in lowland quarries seem to do much better than the birds in the highland areas, and we think in the highland areas it's purely a loss of food supply, particularly pigeons and things which peregrines prey on. But there are always swings and roundabouts. Some species are declining and some species are increasing, and here's one that's increasing. So when I started in the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group area, we had no breeding pairs of goshawk. This is the new kid on the block in our patch and seems to be doing quite well. So we first found the first breeding pair in the sort of around 96, 97 in our area. We've got now just under 20 breeding pairs, and we're finding new pairs every year. The interesting thing with goshawks is as soon as they come to town, you start seeing different breeding behavior from other raptors. So, for example, my kites, I'm afraid, don't like nesting anywhere near goshawks. So usually kites that have been nesting in traditional areas for a while, you'll suddenly find they move, and the next thing you find is you've got a breeding pair of goshawks nearby, and that's why they've moved. And also this species predates quite heavily also on sparrowhawks. So you end up finding that the sparrowhawks are moving into much denser woodland plantation where goshawk to nest where goshawks are around. And this is a fabulous species to work on. And the female goshawk is the size of a buzzard. The male is considerably smaller. They have this fantastic blue eye, the chicks. Very vocal species in woodland. Often the first sign you get of goshawks is you hear them calling back at you. And the chicks can be quite vocal as well. They really thrive in commercial forestry plantations. Of course, we've got quite a few of those in our area, so quite a lot of scope for this bird to expand even further. It is subject to quite a lot of persecution, though, particularly on places that are rearing pheasants. Right, moving on to owls. So with the owls, we've again had some very long-standing studies in our area. In fact, we have hundreds of barn owl boxes out in various places. Many farms in our area will have a barn owl box that's been installed by our group. We have really healthy populations across the area. And in fact, we started trapping barn owls in the winter. I'll talk about that in a minute, along with other owls. And we are catching so many owls that are unringed, suggests to us we have an even healthier population that we don't know about. So this is a thriving species in our area. Its populations fluctuate quite a lot, depending on cold weather. If we have a cold winter, the population crashes and then can recover. And its productivity varies hugely, as do kestrels. If we have a good vole year, so every 4 years, when the vole cycle is high, tend to have good productivity from barn owls, good productivity with kestrels, the vole specialists. And I would argue there's few things more beautiful than a barn owl. And when you hold these birds, they're all feathers. They are so light. I mean, these birds weigh 600-700 grams. So the other new development that we've started, which is our winter work is we've started moving also. I should say we have a really well-established tawny owl project as well. So a lot of tawny owls nesting in boxes and a long-standing ringing program there. But more recently, we've moved into winter trapping of owls using mist nets and tape lures. And we've discovered that we can catch quite a lot of owls in winter as well, including some species that we thought were quite scarce in our area, but are clearly much more common, including these long-eared owls. So when we're tape luring for these birds, we can catch 7 or 8 long-eared owls in an evening, sometimes as almost as many barn owls as you want, plus other species like short-eared owls occasionally as well. And we get an influx of wintering long-eared owls coming in from Scandinavia and Russia during, from about November onwards. But when, we're trapping birds in October, these are probably resident breeding birds and young birds. So this is clearly a bird that we think we've got a lot more of than we knew about previously. And we've now got trapping going on in quite a number of areas. And in all areas, we seem to be finding these birds. So moving on from owls, sparrowhawks, popular bird for our folk to monitor. Across Scotland, there are now quite a number of what we call urban sparrowhawk studies. So the most recent one that I've heard about is in Inverness, where the Highland Raptor Study Group has started monitoring sparrowhawks around the Inverness area. We've had long-standing studies of sparrowhawks in and around our urban areas as well, and have a pretty healthy population of this species. Again, our sparrowhawks are pretty productive. One of the harder nests to find, but we have some people who are really good at finding the nests of this species, tend to nest in denser conifer plantations, as I mentioned earlier. Now, by special request, I'm also talking about ravens. So Stuart asked me to say a bit about ravens. So again, a species that when I started working in this area was largely confined to the highland areas, almost exclusively crag nesting. And what we have seen in recent years is a move into the lowlands of ravens. This species is getting far commoner. And the big development that I think I found the first tree nesting pair in our area on Sheriff Muir in the late 1990s. Since then, we have a booming tree nesting raven population, so mostly nesting in plantations. Interestingly, they quite often use all other raptor species nests, so they can use buzzard nests, they can use red kite nests. There are a number of places where I go and monitor my kites, and expecting to find kites, instead I find ravens nesting in the kite nest. Ravens get the first choice of nests because they're early breeders. They're normally on eggs in mid to late March, and they're also fledged. They have good fledging. They're usually fledging quite a lot of young by sort of late June sort of time. And again, we have had a long-standing raven study. So here's a tree nest, for example, in a Scots pine of a raven. It's one of the colleagues here climbing to a raven nest. We've been colour ringing ravens for decades and decades, and we get next to no recoveries, which we're beginning to get quite suspicious about because we know that Nature Scot issue quite a lot of licenses to farmers to control ravens to prevent agricultural damage to lambs. Yet we would have thought we might be getting some recoveries of birds that we've ringed, but that doesn't seem to be happening. So we have complained to Nature Scot about this and suggested they need to look into this and whether actually farmers and folk who have raven licenses are submitting the full returns, because I think we could reasonably expect some ring birds to be coming back as returns, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And the other good thing about ravens is they can breed in some, as well as producing a lot of young. Here, if you look at this, we've got 5 young, I think, in this nest. so they can be quite productive. They also choose some rather interesting places to nest. So this nest, believe it or not, is in the Clyde Football Stadium at Broadwood in Cumbernauld. You can see the edge of the football stand there. And this nest is built on top of the loudspeaker, the tannoy, in the football ground. And despite football matches being played, the tannoy going off, these ravens seem to fledge young every year. And here are the guys from our raven team with the Broadwood Stadium folk at Cumbernauld, ringing the brood of ravens. Last year, I'm afraid I haven't got a photo of this, but we had a pair of ravens nesting in one of the mouths of the Kelpie horses at Falkirk. Sadly, we don't think that nest is going to continue this year because they've started allowing folk to climb up inside the Kelpies. So we think the birds are probably going to be displaced. But fair play to British Waterways last year. They allowed us to go in and monitor the birds, and they left the nest in situ, even though it was probably a bit difficult for them, if we're being honest. So other raven pairs now, we've got nesting in Glasgow on the gasometers. In Glasgow, they're turning up all over the place. Now nesting in Stirling as well, in the middle of Stirling. We were talking earlier about Abbey Craig, near the Wallace Monument as well. So yeah, we've got a really healthy raven population. So now I'm going to talk about something completely different. So Dave Anderson, who I was talking about earlier, and I, we've both been involved with satellite tagging raptors for many years, and in 2018, I think it was, we got an emergency call from colleagues working in Nepal from the Asian Vulture Project to come out and help tag some Asian vultures because these birds were about to be released from the captive breeding program out there. And I'd had some involvement in 2006. I'd been out to India and worked on the Asian Vulture Project there. For those of you who don't know the history of this, this is a really depressing story where the Asian vulture species, particularly white rump vulture, used to be the commonest large raptors in the world. If you went to Delhi, Indian cities in the 1970s and 1980s, these birds were abundant. But in the 1990s, their population crashed and has continued crashing. And the explanation for this has been poisoning via a veterinary drug that's fed to cattle. And then when the cattle die, the vultures are poisoned. The veterinary drug's called diclofenac. Some of you may be on diclofenac if you have rheumatism or arthritis. But these products are toxic to vultures, particularly the gyps, the griffon vultures. So Dave and I went out to Nepal. This is Kathmandu, and we were asked to help work on this species, the Asian white rump vulture, 2 adults on the left and an immature on the right. And yeah, we had some good fun. So firstly, we were asked to tag birds that were going to be released. And secondly, we were asked to trap some wild vultures along with the Bird Conservation Nepal team. So working in the Chitwan National Park in the lowlands of Nepal, we went out, baited and trapped here. There was around 40 vultures in one trap. Vultures have this rather unpleasant habit of when they're trapped, the first thing they do, given that we've baited the trap with a carcass for them to feed on to try and trap them, the first thing they do is throw up everything they've eaten. So you get this really unpleasant soup of grey material that these birds have thrown up. But once they've done that, you'll be surprised to hear that they're actually quite clean birds, and they're quite clean when you handle them. So, that's one of the sort of spring-offs that we've been able to get involved with. I'm also involved with a kite project in Spain at the moment where we're translocating, believe it or not, birds back from England to Spain. Originally, the birds that were translocated to England came from Navarra in Spain, and now the Spanish population has declined. So we're now helping the Spanish population by translocating red kites back from England to Spain, which we've been doing for the past 3 years, and this year will be the last year. So we've translocated nearly 100 birds to date back, which is an interesting project. So, when you work on raptors, it's quite a close tight network of people that are involved, and you get to work on some interesting projects. And when you travel abroad, you can quite often hook up with other folk who are involved with other raptors as well. And we have networks of red kite specialists, of white-tailed eagle specialists, and I'm now involved in the vulture specialist group, which is quite nice. So when I go to Spain, I'm also helping a bit with vultures too. So yeah, looks like my life is going to be spent on scavenging birds as my specialism. So yeah, and I'm going to leave it at that. But just a thanks really and an acknowledgement to all the folk in our Raptor Study Group. As I said, this photo was taken a few years ago at the Argety Red Kite Centre. We're nearly 70 individuals now. This was the group about 10 years ago when we were much smaller. But we've got a lot of folk interested in raptors these days, which is really encouraging. And I will leave you with a photo of my favourite raptor. And I will stop sharing, shall I?
Yeah, that'd be great. You're getting loads of emoticons coming up there
Oh,
on
that's
the screen.
incredible. I don't even know how to do that.
I don't think I've ever seen so many. That's fantastic. And it was actually amazing to see how many of them came up throughout various bits of your talk. So many people were very grateful and supportive of all the work to change legislation and change policy, but also the successes of so many of the ringing and monitoring projects as well. And I noticed that they were coming up throughout, and it is a real testimony to yourself and all the team at the Raptor Study Groups for just such amazing work to see how relatively few of you there are, and considering you're doing this mostly in your own times and everything, and you're achieving so much.
We
It's
get about, Stuart.
absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how much you get about it. It's almost mind blowing actually the amount you're doing and how much that is contributing to conservation of some of our most iconic and fantastic species. And that it comes over so clearly in the chat. As you were going, as you went species by species, people were going, "Oh, I've seen this here, I've seen that there," and how special obviously these species are to everybody. And I know I still get, I think, excited every time I see a bird of prey. And I remember how amazing it was when I saw my first eagle. I feel that same way every time I see an eagle. I see them more these days because of what I do by day and stuff. But I still get as excited. And I think they're just so amazing birds. That the sad bit, and then you saw that again in people's emotion. You really have seen people's emotions through your talk. It's been a roller coaster. Looking at the emotions that have come up, and also in the chat, as how much we are losing to persecution. And when you were going, showing us what possible territories we have, these number of birds we have, we've persecution and other pressures, what that is doing. But again, so great to see so many positive stories and numbers increasing, and that a difference can be made. There is things to do, and just seeing those inputs and those programs you're doing in the Raptor Study Groups are making a huge effect in what they're doing. So we have a huge number of questions that I'm going to try my very best to get through as many as possible. There is absolutely loads. So I will try my best, folks, to get through as many as I can. I'm sorry about the weird light thing that's going on above me. There's a new light shade. It is my only source of light in this room, and it's not working too well, obviously, for my camera. So sorry about that, folks. Because I know a few of you have commented on it in the chat, and I've tried to sort it, but I can't. So questions from the audience. The most, I'm trying to go by the most upvotes, and Guy's going to try and keep me right because there was a lot, which is fantastic. So the one that people have kind of flagged the most is what reason would there be for raptor persecution within urban and suburban areas?
Yeah, we don't see much raptor persecution in suburban areas, if I'm being honest. I mean, the biggest persecution factor we have had in some areas is pigeon fanciers, uh, killing particularly sparrowhawks and peregrines. But quite often, what we've seen there is pigeon fanciers targeting peregrine nests, and actually, they know these birds are traveling and target particular breeding pairs, especially where they're close to urban areas and maybe predating racing pigeons. But
Right.
as racing pigeon as racing of pigeons has declined as a sport, we have seen a bit less of that.
It's something I wouldn't have thought of. Is that racing pigeons and that being the source, and that kind of links to another question that somebody asked, and I've asked. Is there any danger of sharing things like the actually particularly you'd said about the fact there is breeding peregrines in Glasgow? Is there a danger of sharing that information? And if you were to find or to see a nest, how carefully do you have to treat that information? And what are the sensitivities that yourself and the group have to go into? Well, A, engage the public with nature, but B, not tell too much that it might disturb the nest. What's the sort of balance there?
Yeah, well, the starting point. I mean, some raptor species are more sensitive to disturbance than others, but most of the raptor species, with a few exceptions, kestrel, buzzard, sparrowhawk, are listed on Schedule 1 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So you actually need a license to go anywhere near the nest and to disturb the birds. So the first advice is if you find a nest, I mean, you need to back off basically if it's a specially protected species, and really give the birds a wide berth. So I would certainly encourage that. I would think for most of the Schedule 1 species around here, we know where most of them are, and we monitor them quite carefully, obviously under license from Nature Scott. I mean, some species, I mean, osprey is a Schedule 1 species, but actually is quite tolerant to human disturbance, bizarrely. So, I could take you to a few osprey sites which are on farmland where, if a farmer on a tractor is driving underneath, the bird will continue to sit on the nest and incubate her eggs. But if the farmer gets out of the tractor, she'll probably fly off alarm calling. But these birds habituate to things that they know and routinely see. Yeah, and it does vary from pair to pair. I mean, some of the kite pairs that I've monitored for many years, some I can walk under the nest and the female will just watch me from the nest. I'll walk right under and she'll watch me as I go under. Others, if they see me 200 yards away, they come off. So, you have to, I mean, you get to know the birds really and adapt your behavior accordingly. But the general rule is you shouldn't be going near the nests of the specially protected species. Also, avoiding obviously going near the nests if it's bad weather. If you put a bird off a nest, the eggs can chill and that kind of thing. So most of the monitoring we do, we wait until it's good weather to do if we're doing a nest check. A lot of monitoring you can do without going near the nest as well, spying them from a long distance. So, for example, most of the ospreys do with a telescope from a long distance away.
I think that yeah, a really important message in there. Just always be careful when you're, I guess, out and about. And if you've seen a bird alarm calling or seeming to be distressed by your presence, even if you haven't spotted the nest, it's maybe a good idea that you take a different route or just give a wee bit of space, just to be on the safe side. If you were to see, and I know this is something a few folk have asked, if you were to see someone you think is suspicious or you're worried about, who do you contact? What do you do if there's something you've spotted with a bird opinion? Like, oh, I'm a bit worried about this. What should you do?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the circumstances, but if it's obviously something that looks like a wildlife crime, you should be reporting it to police. And Police Scotland have a network of wildlife crime officers, or you can report. I mean, I manage the RSPB's investigations team across the UK. You can report to RSPB investigations, and we will work with the police on the follow-up. If you see a bird in a trap, for example, that is worth reporting. But, human disturbance, generally, most people are doing it inadvertently. We have had some cases, for example, during COVID in particular, we had real problems with osprey disturbance and folk camping under, probably not knowing they were doing it, but caused osprey nests to fail. Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park in particular. So yeah, it depends on what you're seeing. If you see obvious wildlife, people shooting at raptors, any raptor, that should be reported to the police. If you get any information of people who are killing raptors, that's also useful to the police.
So, yeah, so absolutely, the message would be, if you're seeing some direct and something being injured or about to be injured, or something that's very obviously a crime, get straight onto the police. But as an emergency, it's an active crime taking place, and I guess anything else, if you're worried about it, do pass it on so it can be investigated. You report as a non-emergency, I guess, or to yourselves and the RSPB investigation group, and then that way it can be followed up, and maybe it's something totally innocent, but at least that way the information's there and it can be looked at, I guess.
The Scottish SPCA are very active in this area as well. Locally we've got the Fish Cross establishment as well, which quite often our injured raptors, any we find go there. They've had sea eagles and ospreys and red kites and things in recent years.
Fantastic. So, sort of different type of question. Somebody has asked, why are barn owl populations doing well, but kestrels are declining? Consider, with them both kind of feeding on the same thing, with them both feeding on the voles. Is there any reason why they're both not doing equally as bad or equally as good? This is
Yeah, I mean the barn owl population does fluctuate a lot, whereas the kestrel population historically it was much more abundant and stable. We had a very stable population, but it has declined massively. Most of the barn owls that we have are around the sort of fringes of forestry and open moorland, but also I guess barn owls by their name, they're also hunting in and around buildings where there are rats and mice. Kestrels don't tend to hunt in buildings. So yeah.
great. So another one we've got here is that although given that there has been changes in the raptor laws and laws that will help protect raptors and raptor persecution, is there still work to do in this front? What other things need to be pushed for with changes to policy and law, etc.? Is there any main areas that still need to be closed up and pushed for change?
Raptors are quite well protected. The main issue we have in Scotland is illegal killing of raptors on grouse moors. And unfortunately, the scale of raptor persecution in these areas, they basically act as sinks for raptor. So if they're killing raptors in these places, you just suck in more and more raptors and they end up killing more and more birds. In some grouse moors, they'll be killing hundreds of raptors a year. This is the main problem. So they're not only affecting their local population, they can be quite often affecting a wider population of birds because they're sucking in young birds. So so eagles, for example, as soon as young eagles are actively looking for vacant territories. If you have a vacant territory where there is routine persecution going on and all the adult birds are being removed, all you're going to do is suck in young eagles, and then you get more and more eagles killed, and that's what happens.
Yeah, you don't think about that side of things. I guess to the birds, it's great, lovely territory, and there's nobody else here. I'll just settle down, and then that's them in the firing range as well, and it just keeps taking them on.
Yeah, well,
Um,
what happens with the breeding birds is, if you lose an adult breeding raptor, they're probably replaced in days by another raptor, because you've got this floating population of young birds that are looking to get into the breeding population.
Yeah, that actually leads. That just shows how dangerous it is if you have something like that going on and what it can do. Actually, leads into another question that's been asked and people have been kind of commenting on. You mentioned a few times, like the golden eagles. There was pairs and territories, but not breeding or not very productive, and pairs making nests but not having young. And some people have kind of asked, "Oh, why is that? Why don't they?" Why more like a blue tit, let's say, settle down, make your nest, have young, and it's all over the year. Why does it take so long for them to start having their first young? And why is there so many sort of drifting around that are not even in territories yet?
So eagles are long-lived birds, and you know, many golden eagles will still be alive when they're in their 30s, probably into their 40s. So they tend to start breeding late. So probably, most golden eagles will start breeding when they're sort of 5 to 10 years old. They'll be at their most productive around 16 to 17 years old. And then gradually over time, senescence creeps in and they become less productive. But the most productive, and then they will be replaced by younger eagles. Sometimes younger eagles will come in and kill older birds and replace them. So where you've got a healthy population of eagles, those kind of interactions start happening. We've had cases of satellite tag birds that we've marked that have then been recovered dead, killed by other eagles. So yeah, so you've got all of that stuff going on. But generally, the general rule of thumb in Scotland is the least productive eagles are in the west, where the prey base is less. I mean, you can walk for hours on, moorland in West Scotland and not see a grouse or a hare, whereas in East Scotland, which are the main prey items for golden eagles, they also take things even as big as deer calves, and we see foxes and we've seen badgers in nests as well. So they will take other prey items, but in the least productive areas, it's not unusual to see things like meadow pipits, for example, as prey items in golden eagle nests. In those circumstances, they are struggling to find food of the right size that they need. I mean, the other factor that's, really helps golden eagles is if they have a rabbit warren within their home range.
I, I'm just trying to think if a gold eagle take the meadow pipit, that must be like a canopy. Just
Exactly.
that can't really do much for them. And I know there's been a few comments in the chat, things about golden eagles, and maybe they take non-target prey species. I think folk are maybe meaning livestock and things. But I guess if there is cases where that's happening, a lot of that must be to do with lack of natural prey. That things like, as you said, the grouse, but also mountain hare, and if there's a lack of prey, they're going to have to try and find something.
Yeah, these birds are scavengers as well, but in the winter, eagles feed a lot on deer carcasses, dead sheep, and that kind of thing as well. But in the breeding season, they like live prey if they can get it to take to their chicks. I mean, kites would be no different. In the winter, they will happily scavenge what they can find, but in the breeding season, a lot of their prey is voles and mice. So, there's a switch to more live prey in the breeding season for a lot of these raptor species that's also scavenge.
So again, we're beginning to run out of time, but just I'll try and squeeze in a couple more questions. Um, so somebody has asked, is there any further native raptor species missing from Scotland which should be good candidates for reintroduction?
No, is probably the one that has been talked about occasionally is the eagle owl,
Mm-hmm.
which is I in the was much younger, and as a student, I was involved in eagle owl reintroduction in Germany, and they've thrived there since that reintroduction. There is still some discussion as to whether eagle owl is a native species in the UK or not. But some think yes, some think no. There are some historical evidence of bones and things like that, I believe. But there is still some doubt as to whether eagle owl was ever a native species in the UK. But that is the one that's talked about. But I mean, the raptor species that we've got, I mean, more of the talk is about reintroducing these species to other parts of the UK. So the conversations going on at the moment about reintroducing white-tailed eagles, sea eagles into Cumbria and Exmoor. They've been reintroduced into the Republic of Ireland. They're now breeding in Northern Ireland. So yeah, and we of course exported golden eagles from Scotland to the Republic of Ireland for a reintroduction program there. So, I mean, most of the native raptor species that you would expect in Scotland are now present.
I think it's fantastic to see that, this work and that everything yourself, the Raptor Study Group, been doing, and the fact that we have got these raptors now doing well and getting well in Scotland, or do better. How that's helping on that national and international front. We're helping to do reintroductions elsewhere. That's quite amazing that we're in that position as well. Another. I'm just trying to think what question. There's so many great questions on this. We're running out of time. So one thing that folk have asked is, and I think it's probably the main thing now to just cover before we finish, is how can they be involved? So some folk have asked. Well, I'll try and take it through and kind of I'll break it up a bit. So somebody and a few people have kind of liked it or commented out. How do you get involved in ringing? I think that was meant, first of all, generally, it's how do you get involved in ringing in general for all bird species? What's the way you kind of do that? And also, then, how would you get involved in raptor ringing and the raptor study groups?
So the UK ringing scheme is run by the British Trust for Ornithology. So if you want to train as a bird ringer, you really have to go through their systems, and to get there are various permits you can get up to what's called an A ringing permit, which means you're experienced and you can ring on your own and ring all species. So, I mean, with the raptor study groups, I mean, we are looking, people join us. You have to be involved in some raptor monitoring or do some raptor monitoring if you want to join us. It does help, obviously, to have, some of the skills that you need, like nest finding and bird identification, if in the first place. But there are a lot of people involved with what I would call, monitored raptors for many years that aren't what you would call birders, or people that go out and look for rare birds or could identify, rare waders and warblers and things. I mean, whereas they're very good at identifying raptors, which quite often can be quite difficult. Some species, goshawk, sparrowhawk, honey buzzard versus buzzard. Some of these species can be quite difficult to identify, but, seasoned raptor workers are very good at identifying them, and they're also can be very good at finding their nests as well.
And another thing folk have asked is if they are a landowner. It sounds like we might have a few landowners on tonight, or no landowners that they're friendly with or have contact with, and they think it would be quite good for them to do things like Barnell boxes, Kestrel boxes, Osprey platform even. How how should they go about investigating it? Where can they find out more to either do it in their own land or suggest it to people they know who are lucky enough to have the land to do such things?
Well, they can contact us for installation of barn owl boxes. So always helps if they're prepared to buy the box. That's quite helpful. But yeah, we've got good coverage of folk who've got barn owl boxes. They tend to have study areas. So, for example, we've got a big study in Clackmannanshire. We've got a big study in Stirling area, also over Aberfoyle direction. So it's really getting in touch with the right person that covers the general area.
What would be the best way for somebody to do that? Just look at the Raptor Study Group
Yeah,
website.
if you contact the Raptor Study Group website, leave a message there. The person that monitors the website filters it out to the relevant chair, who then makes sure, I mean, I know the right person to speak to in our group.
Yeah. So the other thing that what's the other thing that kind of that so if you're kind of more got less experience in the way of raptors and things, is there still things you can do for raptors? Either to help influence things like policy and things. I guess that might be, lines of contact your MSP and things like that. And also, is there other things you can do? I guess maybe in terms of biological recording and things like that. So maybe if you've got less experience but also have an interest in the raptors you're seeing, is there sort of those lower level things that folk can get involved in as well?
Yeah, so over the year, I mean, we're involved with a whole range of things. I mean, one area, I mean, believe we have to deal with quite a lot of casework. I mean, you were mentioning that earlier for SWT. We get consulted by folk who are developing new, forestry plantations or building a wind farm, who say to us, we need the raptor data for these areas. So we have some members of our group who help with the raptor data and provide that. We also, on the policy side, I mean, we've got a good example running at the moment, which is exercising quite a bit of our time, unfortunately, where Nature Scot are trying to impose new conditions on Schedule 1 licenses, which we think are largely unworkable and are also going to be quite onerous. So we're having what you might call a very lively discussion with Nature Scot at the moment. There's a motion in the Scottish Parliament as we speak in support of the raptor study groups and our right to access land to carry out research and monitoring. We think this changing condition has been inspired by the Scottish Gamekeepers Association. Surprise, surprise.
Yes. So does that a lot people can be involved in, keep an eye on, and keep an eye on what your local MSPs and things are coming
Oh,
up
well,
in Parliament to contribute
I've just
to.
fired off last week. I fired off 5 or 6 letters to all our local MSPs asking them to support this motion in the Parliament. So it's actually one of our local MSPs who's lodged the motion, a guy called Mark Ruskell, who's the Green MSP for this area. So we've got the other thing is in the Scottish Parliament, there are Scottish Environment Link, which SWT are also a member of, the RAP study groups are a member too, run what's called the Species Champion Programme. So we have 7 or 8 MSPs who are the species champions for the various raptor species. So Mark Ruskell is the species champion for the white-tailed eagle, for example. And John Mason, who's an MSP in Glasgow, he's the kestrel species champion. So we've got a number of these species champions on our doorstep. We liaise with them very closely. Megan Gallagher, who was the deputy leader of the Scottish Conservatives, she's the red kite species champion, and she's been to Argotty on a number of occasions to look at our work there. So we work quite closely with MSPs. Jim Fairley, who's the Environment Minister, was out with the Tayside Raptor Study Group either last year or the year before, ringing ospreys. So we try and maintain good contacts with MSPs as well.
That's it. And I think I'm just trying to come to the last couple of questions. There's so many more. There's like 20 odd questions. We'll get Gillian to follow up with you for some more if people are wanting, if they've got some questions to pass out. But I think I'm just trying to pick one. It's so difficult. I mean, I think a lot of people are really worried about the persecution side of it. That's what a lot of licenses come to. And I think that boils down to, I think, the general question people want to ask is it getting better or is it getting worse? is what it comes to. Are we better than what has been historically, or are we at a kind of new all-time low for raptor persecution?
So in most areas of Scotland, I would say it's getting better, but we've got these really acute problem areas, mostly focused, as I said earlier, around grouse moors, where the levels of persecution are still high and in the past 20 years have probably got worse. So there has been a drive towards intensification of grouse moor management, more burning, more predator control, more illegal killing of raptors to, deliver even bigger grouse bags for clients to shoot. These are the problem areas. And we're very fortunate in the central Raptor Study Group area that up until recently we only had one grouse moor in our area. But as I said, I'm a member of the Tayside Raptor Study Group, and there are some real problem areas there. So, for example, north of Crieff and Comrie, I study all the kites there. As soon as you get north of Comrie into what they call the Strathbran area, around Amelry, sort of west of Dunkeld, it's like we have no breeding pairs of kites in that area, and the only explanation is that they're being illegally killed. You can almost draw a line now around a lot of these grouse moor areas where you've got breeding raptors and where you haven't.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's it's a shame we're still at that point where we're still getting that, and we're still there. I remember I was seeing some stuff with kind of number tracking and people trying to model number. I think it was red kites, especially in the Highlands and other places. And the only way they could get they couldn't quite get the models to fit why they weren't expanding more broadly, like some of the ones done by Oxford and places like that. And the only thing they could factor in was the what was thought to be the persecution rate, and that was the only thing, and that's why the growth rate was so restricted. And it's not a good feeling when you realise that, and that's why we're still losing and not seeing those expansions. Trying to finish on the positive, positive. So I'm trying to. I've got one wee question. I know somebody. I think there's one person who a younger person has asked, so I'm definitely going to try and just squeeze it in here. And there's a few people saying that they think they've seen immature golden eagles potentially, and some say golden eagles, some say immature golden eagles in places including Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling, especially in the winter. And they say, is that possible? Could they have seen a golden eagle in these areas?
Um, on, well, it depends where you're talking about. Certainly, Stirling area. I mean, we've had recent records of golden eagles in the Gargunnock and Campsie Hills and Sheriff Muir and the Oak Hills, these kind of places. The birds do wander across there. I mean, the juvenile eagles are easy to tell because the young ones have a white band on the tail and big white stripes on the underwing. I mean, the adults are almost uniformly, dark brown. But actually, it's more possible in those other areas that you see a sea eagle. So I'm just trying to remember when it was. It was about 1996. I was with a colleague working for RSPB. We'd just been witnesses in a court case in Glasgow, a raptor persecution case, a Glasgow Sheriff Court, and we parked at Kelvin Bridge Underground. And as we came out of the underground, we had a white-tailed eagle fly over our head going up the Kelvin, first record for Glasgow. So you can get white-tailed eagle is probably more likely. We've had a bird recently that was spotted near Grangemouth, a white-tailed eagle on the mudflats at Kinneil, and then was seen close to the Wallace Monument and round Stirling. So yeah, more likely to be white-tailed eagle in those kind of areas than golden eagle.
I would never have thought that. That is fantastic. I know that bit of Glasgow really quite well.
Mm.
Yeah, but that was the last bird I would have thought I would see ringneck parakeet these days hiding around there more than the chance to see the white-tailed seagull. That is absolutely amazing. I think final question or final thing for us to end on is what is usually ask people what their favorite of their subject is that they're talking about. But you've already told us that's definitely red kites. So slightly different version of that is Have you got a particular moment of working with raptors? Have you got a particular story or standout moment from your work of raptors that's the sort of a major highlight?
It's hard to pick out one, but one that sticks in my mind, which I thought was pretty good at the time. And I was working on the Black Isle on the kites. This would have been around 93 or 94. And I went to a kite roost and I saw a sea eagle come in and it got mobbed by the kites. I mean, the kites were going crazy. And I was with a colleague, and at the time we reflected that that was probably the first time that those two species had been seen together in Scotland since probably the sometime in the late 1800s.
Wow.
So that was a bit of a moment.
Oh, what a moment that would be! That is absolutely amazing to have those, even just to see all those kites together. I mean, I'm quite jealous of your red kite roost. Like, a few people said that I get to see them like that. But it's just seeing a white-tailed seagull coming in and being bobbed. That does sound like quite a moment. That would be absolutely amazing.
A kite roost is hard to beat though. But yeah, I mean there are a lot of good moments over the years. Mm.
Yeah, oh, I can imagine. It sounds fantastic. Thank you to yourself and all the Raptor Study Group and everybody involved for all the work you are doing. Amazing work, all the work you're doing for policy and conservation, science research, and helping to make persecution more difficult and increase awareness as well. So thank you so much for all that. And I know that's been said a lot in the chat and in the other questions and things that are there. But I'll end us there because we went even a bit over the target time. There was so many good questions there. But thank you so much, Duncan, for that. Your talk was absolutely fantastic. So much information, so much about some amazing species. So many things just would not have known, and amazing information that's come forward. Really good to see that there is folk out there working for our raptors and what that's delivering. Hearing a little bit about how we can be involved as well, and what others can do and raise awareness. It just shows how they're such iconic species, and you see that for all the stuff people said and how much they mean to them. And people saying, they saw a sparrowhawk today and how important that was someday, and a buzzard just in their garden, how important that was. So it just shows how important they are to us. So thank you again for all the
Yeah.
work you're doing. Thank you
Nice
so
to
much
meet
for coming
everybody and
on.
have a good rest of the evening.
So thank you again, Duncan, and thank you everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you again very soon. So
Well, there's
bye
more of
for
those
now.
things coming. Right.
Yeah, there's loads of lovely comments in the chat. In fact, I think there's over 100 kind of thank you comments in the chat as well. So thank you so much, Duncan, and thank you everybody else, and we will see you again soon.